Welcome to these series of lectures. This is History 2111. The first half of U.S. history, we will run up through the Civil War. I want to use this opening lecture to talk about how my lectures are structured, so you get a good idea of how the kind of questions you're going to get on your exams. This class, I should emphasize in the beginning, has very little in common with the history classes you took in high school. In high school, basically, you were taught to remember or to commit to memory a bunch of relatively useless dates and the deeds of dead white men, and that didn't bear very much relevance to your life. And you promptly deleted these files once the class was over. You're not going to need your memory in this class. You're going to need to engage the material, think critically about it. And we do this by approaching historical events from three distinct perspectives. First, we characterize them. Now, to characterize an historical event is merely to describe it. That's the simplest thing you will do. Let's face it, a child can describe something. You can describe the clothes you're wearing, the car you drove here in, your breakfast or lunch. So characterization is simple description. We will also look at historical significance. Now, this is an entirely different question. Significance bears on importance or the consequences of a particular act. And then finally, and most difficultly for many students, we will look at historical context. In other words, we want to place the historical event we're discussing in the broader scope of history. Where does it fit? What is it a part of? So characterization, significance, and historical context. Let me see if I can give you a few examples of these so you can start thinking about them now. One obvious example would be the Declaration of Independence. This is something all of you have heard of, and you can access it easily online. The Declaration of Independence can be characterized by asking questions, the type of questions that you're taught to ask in journalism school. Who, what, why, where, and when. If you can answer these type of questions for an historical event, you're describing it, you're characterizing it. So let's characterize the Declaration of Independence. First, we have an author, and the primary author, of course, is Thomas Jefferson. We know when it was written, when it was made public. We still celebrate this with fireworks and hot dogs and beer. July 1st, 1776. We know which city in which it was written, Philadelphia. We know what it is. We know what it says. After that famous preamble where Jefferson talks about all men being created equal, he has bullet pointed a long list of grievances. He declares that the United States is severing its ties with England, and here's why. And he goes on and on and on with a long list of bullet points describing those things that the King of England has done to the colonist, necessitating the severance of ties. So these are all simple descriptions, characterizations. Now ask yourself an entirely different question. Why is the Declaration of Independence significant? It's significant, obviously, because it declares and creates the United States of America. You can easily see how significant this is when you think about the role that the United States has played in the past couple of centuries on the world stage. Context. What is the big event going on in 1776 of which the Declaration of Independence is merely one part? That would, of course, be the American Revolution. The Declaration of Independence is a part of the American Revolution. So, context, significance, characterization. Let's look at another one, an event that everyone's familiar with. The attack on Pearl Harbor. We know the date, December 7th, 1941. We even know the time. I believe it's around 8 o'clock Sunday morning. We know where it took place, in Pearl Harbor, in Hawaii. We know the casualties, around 3,000. We know the method that the Japanese used to attack us. It wasn't infantry, it was airplanes. bombers and fighters. These planes, of course, we know arrive in Hawaii via aircraft carriers. So these are all significances. These are all characterizations of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, ask yourself, why is it significant? The obvious answer is that it brings the United States into the Second World War. Now, ask a third question, an entirely different question. What is the historical context for Pearl Harbor? Pearl Harbor is a part of the Second World War. That is the big event of which Pearl Harbor plays a part. So if you want to place Pearl Harbor in the broad scope of history, that's the obvious place. You could narrow it a bit and say it's part of the Pacific theater of the Second World War. So again, characterization, significance, context. I'll give you one last one to get you to think about these three perspectives, and that would be 9/11. Everyone here remembers 9/11, even if you were a child. We can characterize it by describing the targets. We have the Pentagon, we have the World Trade Center. Perhaps the White House or the Capitol would have been the target of that plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Casualties, again, approaching 3,000. Method, commercial airliners, hijacked. We have the hijackers themselves that are around 19 or 20. There are 4 planes hijacked, so you need a pilot for each one of the planes, and you need muscle to control the crew and the passengers. We could describe the hijackers as Muslim. We could also describe their nationalities. This poll has been asked of the American people, what were the nationalities of the 9/11 hijackers? And we get a variety of answers, Syrian, Iranian, Iraqi, Afghani, and so on and so forth. Of course, the only hijackers on these planes are from Egypt and Saudi Arabia. This surprises people when they find out. The problem, of course, is that Egypt and Saudi Arabia are our 2 closest Arab allies, and we cannot invade them. You notice we did find 2 countries to invade, Afghanistan and Iraq. So these are all simple characterizations. Now, significance. 9/11 provoked the United States into invading Afghanistan and Iraq, 2 invasions that we're still dealing with today, more than a decade later. Domestically, there were significances. The American domestic airline industry underwent a time of troubles, to put it mildly. The United States government passed the Patriot Act, which allows the government to intrude upon your private affairs. So there were domestic significances as well. Context. What is 9/11 a part of? Well, the obvious answer would be the war on terror. The acts of terrorism did not begin with 9/11, nor have they ended, as you well know. So you could place 9/11 into this broader scope of history, the war on terror, or if you're a professional historian, you might back up even further to place it in an even broader scope. And that could be the lasting bitterness and suspicion, hostility, stemming from the Crusades of 1,000 years ago. So context is tricky because we're so close to 9/11 that it's not entirely clear yet what all the different contexts may be. But certainly the war on terror is the most obvious one. So this is how I structure my lectures, and these are the type of questions that you will get on your exams. The exams will ask about context and significance and characterization. I will never ask you a high school question like, when did such and such occur? Or who invaded what? Those are the type of answers that you can get on Google. One of the problems that some of my students have with my exams is that indeed they go to Google and try to find answers. And Google doesn't answer the questions that I ask, which gets students in trouble. Google generally does not talk about context and does not talk about significance. So the answers to these questions are going to be found in the lectures themselves. And I'm usually fairly explicit. I will tell you up front why something is significant. Where does it fit in history? What is its context? So keep these in mind. That's a quick introduction to the type of, or how my lectures are structured and the type of questions you'll get on your exams. Of course, we'll have an orientation and we'll go into more detail on class procedures at that point. But I'm going to end this opening lecture there. Thank you.